Today I found my employer's body, and I alone know why he did it. By Reddit user Lapis Lazuli. Today marks one of the most significant days of my life. It's my 20-year anniversary of working for Mr. Soto-Gomez, my employer. It is also the day I discovered Mr. Soto-Gomez's body, slouched deeply into his office chair, viscous smears of gray matter dry against the leather headrest. And unfortunately, today is the day that I too shall die. I'll never forget my interview to work at FTF Corp 20 years ago. Mr. Soto-Gomez, pioneer and director of the enigmatic technology company, was younger than I expected. No older than 35, he was neatly dressed in button-up shirt, slacks, and shoes, all black. Heavy eyebrows furrowed over keen, dark eyes that traced my every movement. He emanated a somber, quiet intelligence, and to me he felt like death himself. He sat at the other end of the conference room table, drumming his fingers along the side of his neck while he watched me. I had brought a folder that contained 3 copies of my resume, references and typing speed scores, all laminated. I had spent hours practicing answers to interview questions in the days prior. Mr. Soto-Gomez inquired for none of it. He simply examined me. Dark, thoughtful eyes traced the details of my face and posture. Just as I was reaching the point of discomfort, he gently asked me a single question. If you were certain to die tomorrow, how would you spend the rest of today? I paused, somewhat put off and having no rote answer prepared. It was a question I'd heard before, a classic of the get-to-know-yas from childhood. I answered as honestly as I could. Well, sir, to tell you the truth, I think I would live it exactly as I would live any other day. I would want to experience my own personal existence one last time. Mr. Soto-Gomez's eyebrows briefly unfurrowed, a break in his demeanor I would never witness again. Really? You would take those final precious hours and live them as you already do? I would, with gratitude for the opportunity to do so one more time. Mr. Soto-Gomez regarded me warily, shark-like eyes seemingly evaluating every molecule of my being. You start tomorrow, Miss Carpenter. No skirts or dresses, if you please, as you shall be accompanying me everywhere, and I spend much time in the lab. My attorney shall meet with you on your way out. There will be substantial paperwork to complete before you begin. Congratulations and welcome. Mr. Soto-Gomez's warning was not frivolous. After the routine new hire paperwork, the attorney walked me through voluminous stacks of non-compete contracts, employee handbooks, and most importantly, non-disclosure agreements. I was familiar with non-disclosure agreements from prior office jobs, but soon found myself initialing my assent to unusual requirements, such as shall not imply, explain, or describe interior or exterior FTF Corp premises, layouts, furnishings, or features to a third party, and shall not disclose the origin of any parts, materials, or components of any project or device developed by FTF Corp, and shall not communicate or indicate in any way to a third party the personal details of any employee or officer of FTF Corp, including physical or behavioral descriptions, speech patterns, or biographical information. Over the next 20 years, I would learn that those provisions were never meant to protect the company. They were to protect Mr. Soto-Gomez. Safety measures that mean nothing now. My first week on the job largely involved acquiring security clearances with government agencies in 12 different countries. FTF Corp was a technology research and development contractor, though exactly what kind of technology it researched and developed, I struggled to piece together. What was made clear to me, however, was that I was to serve as Mr. Soto-Gomez's right hand in all aspects of his work. I accompanied him virtually everywhere, as I was expected to meet his requests at a moment's notice, whenever they occurred to him. Much of this was note-taking, calendaring and scheduling meetings, ordinary secretarial minutiae. But some of his orders were more unique. Miss Carpenter, there is a boy in California named Marcus Bernhardt. He should be about 17 years old. Please locate him and determine whether he has applied to university yet, and if so, where he intends to go. Ensure he does not learn such an inquiry is being made. Miss Carpenter, please call our contact at NASA and inquire as to the present approximate speed and location of the 919 Averis asteroid. Miss Carpenter, contact our attorneys and have these research notes and 8 million krona placed into a trust for a Mr. Lars Leosen of Sweden. I believe he presently resides in Helsingborg. Ensure he's not informed of the existence of the trust until his 42nd birthday. I took pride in accomplishing every request I was given to the letter, no matter how obscure. I spent my days diligently following Mr. Soto-Gomez through various research and military facilities, to offices, labs, and hotels, and on private jets that shuttled us between scientists and government officials around the world. There was only a single place I was not permitted entry: the basement level of the FTF Corp building itself, a room he referred to as Lab 1. Mr. Soto-Gomez alone had clearance to Lab 1. Its existence was known to perhaps only 4 people in all of FTF Corp, accessible only by a single private elevator hidden behind a wall panel in Mr. Soto-Gomez's executive office. Mr. Soto-Gomez's disappearances into Lab 1 were infrequent, perhaps once or twice a year, and it would often be weeks before he returned. During these absences, I was not permitted to contact him or allow others to know his location for any reason, and was given instructions via email alone. These emails came sporadically, and often demanded the most unusual or difficult requests of my employment. Get all notes or papers on gravitational compensation for celestial bodies. Check with Dr. Berdini at Oxford. Check with contact at company for U-235. Request 1 standard order and 1 additional HT synthopolymer units at NM drop spot. 1 week. Purge all notes, research, and materials on Project Daedalus from FTF files and inventory. Tell attorneys to remove references and records from all Corp documents. In 24 hours, ensure it never existed. The days following Mr. Soto-Gomez's return from Lab 1 were my least favorite. His arrival was never announced. The wall panel disguising the elevator would simply slide open, and he would stagger out, exhausted, filthy, and despondent. I was unsure what machinations he fought with down there, but I knew that whatever they were, they always won. Mr. Soto-Gomez would often remain silent for days after his return, a dark, brooding raven of a man who refused all appointments and would spend night and day furiously at work behind his desk monitors, privately taking quiet rage out upon his keyboard. Thus was the cycle of my work at FTF Corp, a routine I slowly became accustomed to over the course of my tenure. As years of diligently shadowing Mr. Soto-Gomez passed, I found myself speaking to foreign military generals on a first-name basis, knowing the names and academic specialties of burgeoning scientists around the globe, and even learning to speak Spanish and Russian. After a decade had passed, I came to regard Mr. Soto-Gomez not just as my boss, but as a friend, at least to the extent that such a private, idiosyncratic man can be said to have friends. On Christmas of my 12th year, while drinking scotch in a hotel bar and going over the lab schedule, Mr. Soto-Gomez made one of the only personal inquiries he would ask throughout my career. "Miss Carpenter, you have committed much of your life, over 10 years now, assisting me in developing and selling technologies most of the world will never even know exists. I ask you, not as your employer, but as your friend, have you any regrets?" I put down my tablet and scotch to ponder the question carefully. Though his hair and eyebrows had begun to gray, Mr. Soto-Gomez's eyes remained thoughtful pools of placid, dark water. I was reminded of the day he interviewed me, the day I realized he was my only possible future. My only regret is that I could not have begun sooner. Mr. Soto-Gomez smiled languidly as he stared into space. A regret we share, I'm afraid. In the years that followed, his excursions to Lab 1 became ever more frantic and protracted. Sometimes I would not even receive any instructions during his absence. The only indications that he was not dead or missing were the updates to his email account and personal research files, which he must have been accessing from computers in the lab below. In my 18th year of employment, he disappeared for all of July, firing off strange, irregular requests of me daily, written as though he'd gone mad. Check if Michelle O'Boyle's still alive. Ireland or Wales. If dead, send date. Contact engineering. Find out if adamantium exists. If so, order half a ton. Cost unimportant. Max GW capacity of city electrical grid and FTF grid. Request schematics ASAP. That August, I came into work to find Mr. Soto-Gomez sprawled out on the floor of his office, unconscious and in pieces. As near as I could tell, he had not eaten the prior month nor changed his clothes. He was filthy and pungent, his shirt tore open with buttons missing, his face horribly gaunt and patched with an uneven gray-streaked beard. He spent the rest of the week in a hospital on fluids, silently working at a laptop as much as his body would allow, unwilling to speak to even me. Near the end of my 19th year, I walked into the office to find Mr. Soto-Gomez once again summoning his private elevator to Lab 1. He nodded politely to me as the doors sealed together between us, as if nothing could be more normal, as if we were two strangers passing on a crowded street. The moment I heard the mechanism of the elevator shifting the compartment down to the depths of the lab was the only time I ever cried while in his employ. Dropping into his office chair, I put my head in my arms and sobbed, my body shaking with a despair I myself could barely understand. After some deep, meditative breathing, I was able to settle my body down and return my mind to the present. As I fixed my makeup in a pocket mirror at his desk, I checked my tablet to see that I had already received a new email. Join me in Lab 1. A sense of dread clutched at me as his elevator doors shut, sealing me in. There were no buttons, no panels. Every wall of the elevator was smooth, uninterrupted steel, as though it had been welded together around me. For a moment I panicked, and then it began to descend. Welcome to Lab 1, Miss Carpenter. As the doors reopened, I found myself staring into what I could only describe as a massive, brightly lit airplane hangar. The ceiling was at least 80 feet above me, fluorescent lights shining harshly against the polished concrete floor. Mr. Soto-Gomez stood politely near the elevator entrance to greet me, but as I stepped out, I was unable to break my eyes away from the object at the center of the room. A massive half-orb of metal protruded upward from the floor like an overturned bowl. It shined with an impossible gleam as though made of liquid mercury. From its sides extended heavy industrial cables like steel umbilical cords, connecting it to gargantuan generators dispersed along the perimeter of the lab. On the front face of the half-orb was a circular porthole-like door that sealed longwise in the center, reminding me of a cat's eye. The machine emitted a low melodic hum that somehow reached my mind without bothering to pass through my ears, a pleasant vibrato my brain struggled to comprehend. "Do you know what we do here at FTF Corp., Miss Carpenter?" asked Mr. Soto-Gomez as he took a position by my side, staring with me at the miraculous machine. "We develop technology to best address the needs of a future world," I replied, mechanically reciting our corporate slogan without thinking. "No, Miss Carpenter, that is a fiction. The truth is that we sell the technology of my world in the hopes of gaining what is needed to build a different future for this one." I started, breaking my focus from the machine to look at Mr. Soto-Gomez, who eyed me patiently. "You're not from this world?" "No, not exactly. I'm from the world that is built atop the ruins of this one, a future Earth, one that won't exist for many years yet." "And you came here in this?" I whispered to myself, turning again to the shimmering teardrop of silver at the center of the room. What happens to this world?" Mr. Soto-Gomez's tone grew cold. "A calamity. An event of such magnitude, the Earth is changed forever. What little is left of humanity is changed forever." "Then why come here?" I asked, the machine's hum filling the back of my mind like music underwater. "Because in my time it will happen again. I built the Avum to try and change the future, but it broke and stranded me here in the past, in an era where the resources do not yet exist for me to fix it, no matter how I try." "And is this calamity coming soon?" "No," Mr. Soto-Gomez replied with a wan smile. "Not for much time yet." That was 2 months ago. 2 months before my 20th year with FTF Corp. 2 months before I found Mr. Soto-Gomez's body slouched into his chair, a handgun nestled into the carpet beneath his limp, outstretched fingers. 2 months before I would realize what the next day would bring. And there, on his desk, scrawled in dark black ink on a yellow notepad, was the time traveler's final message, not just to me, but to us all. If you were certain to die tomorrow, how would you spend the rest of today?